Happening now, we'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room for October the 18th, 2017. This is actually Wes Fryer. My daughter was very upset that I was going to get this guy. My golden retriever is quite excited. We're not going to have a puppet show tonight. We're actually going to talk about technology news as we always do. And I'm joining from Oklahoma City, where it is a lovely, cool evening, and we are in the midst of hopefully transitioning finally into fall. Joining, as always, by Jason Neiffer, who is sure to bring much more levity and intelligence to the conversation than I perhaps will be able to tonight. Hello, Jason.
Only reflecting your amazingness, Wes. Good evening. I am joining tonight from lovely Missoula, Montana, where we're starting to get some crisp evenings as well, although it's funny because the thing about Montana is that even when fall comes and then winter comes, you could get a rogue 80-degree day. So it was just windy and in the 60s today, but I expect there to be probably a warmer day next week. And that is the loveliness of Montana weather. So before the show, Wes and I were commenting that we seem to have a growing list of links each week. And in fact, we've talked about actually maybe in the relatively near future doing a single topic show on the notion of Chromebooks, which means this link horde is going to get even larger, but we'll see what we can get through tonight. And by the way, this is the EdTech Situation Room, a weekly podcast where you can hear educational news with, tech news with an educational lens. And if you want to see all of our magic links, the ones we get to or not, you can go to our website, www.edtechsr.com. And Dr. Fryer, where should we start this week?
All right. Well, I think I'm going to start with security. And we've talked quite a few times on the show about the need for security, how two-step authentication or verification is critical. We should turn that on all of our devices. And this week, Google has actually announced an advanced protection which locks down accounts like never before. So this is a Wired article from yesterday on October 17th. I've also dropped links into the Google Safety Center, which has really practical and good suggestions for how we can keep ourselves safe and secure, an excellent resource to share with teachers as well as parents and students. And then the actual link to the Google Advanced Protection Program. And this was a response apparently to well-publicized hacks that John Podesta, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, had, Colin Powell, others, phishing attacks where folks are able to convince you that, yes, you need to click on this link and put in your account credentials. We've talked about ransomware and all other kinds of attacks. We've also briefly mentioned OAuth, which is an authentication scheme that uses your Google credentials. I'm actually interested to know how this would affect on. And I suspect because this breaks native Apple apps, for instance, like Apple Mail and Apple Calendar, you have to use the native Google applications and you have to sign in with Chrome. It's really, focus on security. This isn't going to be for everybody. This is really who are targeted or potentially going to be targeted by hackers. We've talked before about how security, needs layers, and anybody who, is in a house or a building, technically is at risk at some point. It just depends on how many resources and how much time, somebody wants to invest in terms of penetrating the layers of security that you have. But I think this is a good sign. I did actually visit with one of our teachers this week. We have a teacher actually who does not have a cell phone. They pretty much kind of live off the grid. And so using a USB key would be an option for this person or for other people that don't want to carry their smartphone with them. But I don't think many of us are going to want to sign up for advanced protection because it means you can't use SMS messages, you can't use the Google Authenticator app. And actually, if you go through the sign up, which I just looked at briefly tonight, you have to purchase two pieces of hardware. You have to have a physical USB security key, and then you also need a Bluetooth security key, which the link right off of Google's website now is sold out on Amazon. And that allows you with your smartphone or your tablet to go ahead and sign up. So what do you think, Jason? Is advanced security needed today? And who do you think there's any educational users out there, superintendents or board trustees or anybody is this something that's beyond us in education? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think part of it has to do with the fact that there are, obviously privacy laws that impact schools. The one I'm thinking, of course, is a FERPA, which deals with student data, student information. But the part of this that I have a problem wrapping my brain around is that, I mean, obviously hacking is going to happen, right? That's not an excuse by any stretch of the imagination. It's just the reality of the world we live in. But how valuable is student data in the context of extraordinary security measures? I don't think I would necessarily go for something like this myself, although clicking through the links that you shared, Wes, you can get into this hardware-wise for about $50. That's not a high price to pay to put such extraordinary security on the system. But I think if you just set up two-factor authentication and do your best to do that, even if you end up becoming the victim of one of these hacking attacks, it's probably not a huge deal. But I also don't generally trade in HIPAA information, health-related information. And the educational records I trade in, I think, are best secured by mainstream security measures like two-factor authentication. But I do think that there are professionals we work with in context of education that may want to consider something more extraordinary than the standards of two-factor authentication. But I mean, I think it's a really interesting what-if scenario in regards to schools. If private information does leak, and there have been instances in the last month or so where districts have actually had student data stolen and utilized in basically attacks, right? There was a situation in northwestern Montana, another situation a few weeks ago in Nebraska that was very similar, where there was student data stolen from student information systems or hacked in student information systems and then utilized to send threats to schools, students, and parents. And in an era where we are very paranoid about data security, I do think policymakers might ask questions like, are you doing absolutely everything possible to lock down student data? And I'm not sure if we have an answer yet to what the balance is between those extraordinarily critical needs. At the same time, I want to be able to get into my email account each morning without jumping through 3 or 4 additional hoops. So I don't know. I'm not sure if there is a balance, an obvious balance there yet. I'm certain that the courts will get involved at some point, specifically as it relates to schools. But it's we say this a lot here on the podcast, but it is a whole new world. And I'm not sure if our old rules really matter here. At the same time, I'm not sure if new rules are abundantly clear. So we seem to be in an ambiguous point. And I think it begs the question then, what are we doing broadly? So Wes, for example, administratively, what steps have you taken at your school to lock down student data?
Well, we are implementing required two-factor authentication with Google for everyone. Yep. In fact, yesterday I had a chance to visit with all of our high school faculty and do a demonstration and help faculty do that. And so by the end of this calendar year, everyone is going to be required to do that. We are moving towards single sign-on. We don't yet have, and this is the interesting thing about security, right? Like the more you reveal, the more you tell others, your vulnerabilities. We don't have single sign-on for everything, but we are on that road. And this is a road we've been on for a long time. I remember I worked at Texas Tech University in Lubbock from probably 1999, 2000 to 2006. And, we were talking at that time with the university, they were really working towards a single sign-on. They had so many different authentication schemes and so many different departments. When someone has access to your system is who they are, and being able to have some control over that. So that's the main thing that we're implementing. It is interesting to think about students, and I don't see us doing that as far as implementing, student two-factor. But I have been told by other school CIOs that, from a liability standpoint, by the way, we're not lawyers on this show. We're not giving legal advice. But we've been told by others who aren't lawyers either that, their school lawyers have said two-factor, in court cases has been really important in terms of the access to cloud-based data. We've also asked our users not to use email clients on their laptop computers. So that means they're not going to be downloading attachments, downloading student information, automatically. It's going to be in the cloud, and they might selectively download those things, but trying to, keep things in the cloud and keep things that way. I'm glad you mentioned that Montana situation, because you mentioned that a few weeks ago on the show. Maybe it's even a month ago, and I don't know that we talked about it. I dropped the link in our chat room, and by the way, welcome to Jamie Camp, I think coming to us from Texas, and Peggy George from Arizona, who are in our chat room. This is an article from CSO, which is an IDG publication, and the title is "Dark Overlord Hacks Schools Across U.S. Text Threats to Against Kids to Parents." And this was not only schools in Montana, but it was also in Iowa, Texas, and Alabama. And what was crazy about this was they gained access to the student information system, and they didn't simply, send a ransomware Bitcoin request to the administration or to, board members or whatever. They directly, parents, through text messaging and maybe email. This says text. And really, struck some chords of fear within schools when you start to talk about, school violence and things like that. And so it's scary stuff. So we all need to be proactive, when it comes to security. And so I'm glad to see Google doing this. I think I agree with you that just simply setting up two-factor passwords on different accounts is the most important thing that right. Generally users can be doing. But I'm glad to see a continuum of additional steps to say, hey, if you want to go further, kind of like with your credit right. with Equifax, you want to lock down your credit, if you want to go to this advanced security level, it's available. And we're certainly not looking to companies like Yahoo to do this, right? We had the article a couple of weeks ago where, several years ago now, it's been admitted every single Yahoo account, millions and millions of accounts were actually, compromised and hacked. So I think the other implication from a school standpoint is looking at the security of our devices and the degree to which we can manage and wipe them from the cloud. On kind of a negative note, we've upgraded to High Sierra on a few of our systems, and we use the Mac OS server to re-image Mac laptops. One of the things an Apple rep had told us a few weeks ago was that Apple was going to move away from that and was going to be doing really cloud-based, wipes and formats and using mobile device management. And I've spoken with some other technology directors who've talked about that as far as their refreshes, that they really don't touch machines. It's all handled through, in that case, Jamf and their mobile device manager. Really puts a lot of strain potentially on your network, needs to look at caching servers and stuff like that. But that's really the Google model, right? The Google model is your data is in the cloud, you connect your device and then pull the content to you when you need it. And so it's pretty interesting to see Apple moving in that direction, as well as Microsoft. And I think one of the biggest things pushing companies in this direction are the security aspects and the security threats.
Right, absolutely so. And and looking at this, I don't think the extra steps are that onerous. Like I could see carrying a Bluetooth USB device, and as well as our Bluetooth device and the USB device to be able to log into email, but it's definitely an interesting phenomenon, and we'll just need to keep an eye on it. And one thing I did want to mention about the hacking of schools article, the most stunning thing about that event to me was that someone logs in and downloads a bunch of student data. It's definitely a FERPA violation. It definitely violates the privacy of students. Could reveal some extremely sensitive information. But what the hackers did there was they weaponized that information, not just with a handful of individuals, but with the mass of individuals, whether there was embarrassing information in a particular student's account or not. And when we get to the point where even relatively bland student data is weaponizable, it's a bad deal, and something we certainly need to be acknowledging of. And in an era where you're carrying student data with around you on a phone or a tablet or a laptop, whether it's school owned or not, we need to be thinking about standards to make that not a reality.
I think we're going to have some categories of the show for And now in good technology news, because we don't want to just be dystopian and get everybody down. So I think this is important as a technology director for me to remember. I'm not trying to play the fear card just to scare people. I really I was visiting with someone who was really down on the two-step and just they aren't wanting it. They think it's too burdensome, and so I talked about the Equifax hack with teachers and just talked about the normalization of the security threat environment. It's not something we want to overplay like Chicken Little, and we want to balance it with good as well, right? Because there is a lot of news out there besides and today in the next day in hacking.
Yep.
But we could we could do a show all about that, but we want to assure people we'll talk about more than just that. So, Jason, do you have another article you'd like to take us to besides? And obviously, we can return to security as well.
Sure, yeah.
Where else can we go tonight? Because
there's another 2 dozen articles.
This is a long list.
So, let's talk about some kind of more mainstream technology news. Windows 10 Fall Creators Update is available as of, I believe it was yesterday, was when Microsoft was allowing you to download that particular piece of software. And as a reminder to our viewers that are maybe not steeped in the modern Microsoft ecosystem, Windows 10 is supposedly the last version of Windows, and Windows 10 will release updates every 6 months to the operating system. Now, that's come with some interesting implications, some of which we've talked about in the past in regards to the lack of support for older hardware platforms. For example, earlier devices that have the so-called Atom chips from Intel are no longer supported by modern versions of Windows 10 because they're not fast enough to support the software. But for those of you that have Windows 10 machines that are outside of a managed computer network, you'll get a notification right now. Right now is a strong word. Over the next couple of weeks to download the newest version of Windows 10. And if you want to jump the line, if you will, there are articles that allow you to do that. We're posting a Verge article tonight about the Fall Creators Update. But there's also a great article from a separate article from The Verge that talks about the newest features in Windows 10 Fall Creators Update. And I want to give a couple of notes there. The first one is that OneNote, which is the cloud storage system that comes with Windows and Office 365, is now an on-demand system, if you wish, which is like the new Google Sync system. Basically, it allows you to download OneDrive and only download the files you're either immediately using or downloading whole directories or individual files to store on your local computer if you expect to be out of internet access. We talked about this a few weeks ago. It's also available now as file sync in the Google App System. A great solution, especially if you're buying one of the modern laptops that seems to have less storage on them than their a few generation of back cousins. That is certainly an interesting feature and something I would plan to use utilizing the new version of Windows 10. In addition, there is a new People's app. Oh, go ahead, Wes.
I'm curious, where are you with OneNote? Because that's something we've had some of our administrators really love, and we've got a few actually moving towards Mac, but very interested in how Microsoft appears to be making their products, run better on Mac. So where are you on the OneNote use?
I like OneNote.
Are you?
It's a very functional system. I do like what Microsoft has done in the Microsoft Education product. The Microsoft Classroom heavily uses a OneNote system along with their new collaboration suite called Microsoft Teams. It's pretty great. But to be honest, I think OneNote is better than Evernote. But I don't really use either because I'm steeped in the Google Drive architecture. And I love the notebook concept. I think it's easy to organize. It's very well done piece of software. It works great across platform. It's just not something that's worked into my workflow at this time.
Right. So what else is there for the updates in this creators release?
There is an update to Microsoft Edge, which is the replacement browser for Internet Explorer. It's a wonderful, fast, crisp web browser. I think it's Microsoft's best browser to this date. There are enhancements to pen and touch interfaces, particularly writing on a Windows tablet or Windows touchscreen, which is I think pretty solid. And there's also some better monitoring for nerds of CPU usage and graphics processing power usage. So you can bring more statistics up to find out what's going on behind the scenes, especially on faster computers, which may feel slow to you. You can start tracking what it's utilizing, some of the graphics power and some of the CPU power.
And to the point of security, that is a key tool, right? As a troubleshooter for IT, whenever you have on a Mac a spinning, beach ball, or the system is not running, which, by the way, it's amazing how people kind of adapt to a new normal, and sometimes users don't realize, oh my gosh, this is taking forever, for this to happen. Going to what is sometimes called the process manager. I think that might be what Windows calls it. It's the activity monitor, I think, on the Mac. And then you can click at the top to filter by CPU usage. And so sometimes you'll see something weird. I mean, there's all kinds of things. And sometimes it is system resources that are legit. But it gives you an idea what is consuming resources. And if you see something consuming a lot, you certainly can Google it, find out what it is, and that is oftentimes, if it's a suspicious thing, a reason to wipe the system and clear the data off. So that's another thing I would just say. Best practice today is install Google Drive and Sync, which is the new enterprise for G Suite user application that will synchronize selectively, what you've got in the cloud to your machine. It's almost like the Chromebookization of computing devices, because if you put all of your stuff into your Google Drive folder, and then when something happens, you get something, then zap, your machine can be blown away and it can be reinstalled. So I'm really curious on the Microsoft side to see what they do with the management, and if they are able to innovate, to catch up to Google, or surprised if they exceed them. But that, to me, that's the biggest benchmark, is the Google Admin Console, and Microsoft is trying to chase that with their Windows S or whatever, but still haven't played with that yet.
Yep. So I'm excited. I do own various Windows platforms. I have a desktop at work. I have a Surface Book that I utilize occasionally, which is a great platform, and then also some older Lenovo laptops. So I'll definitely get it installed and start putting it through its paces. I was on a beta version of it on an older laptop, and I played with it a bit, and it seemed nice. But I am really excited to have a really I guess fresh OS system. I mean, I'm glad that Microsoft has adopted both the Chrome OS and the Mac OS thought, that they are releasing regular updates on their operating system, and it is evolving. I think Windows 10 of October 2017 is light years ahead of Windows 10 of summer 2015 when it was released. So great news in the Windows architecture system.
See, there we go. We do talk about good news here. And on the completely unrelated, we've been having some chats about the rather amateurish looking tinfoil hat. And so Peggy George has helpfully provided a video how to make a tinfoil hat in less than 2 minutes. Perhaps we should offer a shout out to any of our listeners who want to assist us with tin hat construction. If you would like to send Wes your links, that would be great. I think I'd like to go to something else that's kind of just cool and awesome that has to do with our solar system. And one of the things I think mentioned on the show before, love to do as a STEM teacher and just a teacher of whatever you're going to talk about. I love curiosity links, articles and news and things that just really pique your curiosity. And these can be writing prompts that students can use. They can be obviously conversation starters. But NASA has a press release out, which is from NASA JPL on October 4th, the super Earth that came home for dinner. And I found out about this because of a Futurism article on October 13th. NASA press release says our solar system has a 9th planet. I talked to my son, who's a sophomore in college last night, and he said, "Oh yeah, Dad, they knew about that, a year ago." So I'm thinking maybe there's more scientific consensus building around it, but evidently, as we have been discovering more exoplanets out beyond, our solar system, and even the Milky Way galaxy, we are seeing, and well, I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe all the exoplanets are in our galaxy. I don't know if they are. There are other solar systems where we have observed Earth-like planets, but they're about 20 times our mass, much more massive. And so in order to account for all of what's happening in terms of the motion of our solar system, a growing number of scientists are saying there is a dark planet out there that is way, way beyond, multiple times beyond the orbit of Neptune. And we haven't seen it yet, but we have sensed it, and the models account for it. And so they're calling this a super Earth. This isn't something that would be on a collision course with Earth. But, you know, we had all kinds of hoopla when they decided Pluto was not a planet. And it's kind of cool, you know, Pluto, if you looked at the orbit, all the first 8 planets, or what are now considered to be our 8 planets in our solar system, line up on a single plane. And Pluto it's still out there, right? We just are not calling it a planet, is off kilter. It's not on the same elliptical plane. And so this dark planet, and because of the math and how it all works, they think is, you know, actually going, I think, the opposite direction, and it's also angled. So also in NASA news from Futurism, October 13th, NASA's new ion thruster breaks records, could take humans to Mars. And so, you know, I think this kind of thing is exciting. I've always just, you know, loved space, and, you know, think that we're oftentimes very inspired to, you know, dream dreams when not only we watch science fiction, but when we see, you know, things happening for real with the space program and what we see happening with commercial space and things like that. So, Jason, what are you all doing at the Montana Online Digital Academy to encourage the next generation of STEM students? I bet you guys probably have a collection of STEM classes.
We do, and we're always kind of trying to figure out where to aim more to student bodies across the state of Montana. Our program is really all about access, particularly at the most rural of rural schools. One of the things that we talk a lot about in context of our program is that there's rural schools, and then there are states like Montana where there are schools that have a graduating class of 4 kids that, you know, are 100 miles away from the nearest medium-sized town, and 500 miles away from you know, a large supermarket. That those places do exist in the American West. But one of the things we do like to do is provide access to unique and interesting electives in the science and mathematics fields, in addition to advanced placement courses. Something we're very interested in is access for advanced placement students. So we've been working really hard to try to give more access to those pieces. But it's tools like this, and I'm really glad to see Google go in this direction. It's tools like this that I think really give you know, a way to enlighten and delight in this particular content, in the same way that I was kind of a space geek as a little kid too, but for me it was a manual telescope and a large star book that encouraged me. There's just so much more you can have access to now that is really quite extraordinary. And, you know, at the risk of sounding like, you know, old man Knifer, these kids just don't know how good they got it. Like I would have killed to have access to some of these amazing tools 30 years ago.
Absolutely. And actually, I hadn't in that same article, and if you're following along on our show notes, one of the things I've started to do in the shows as we go along is kind of elevate, not kind of, I am, moving articles up as we talk about them. That way they're in order when we go ahead and create the show notes. Jason talking about Google going this way is a shout out to an article that was in that same section, Space Out with Planets and Google Maps, from Google on October the 16th, 2017. And so I actually wrote a blog post about this on Speed of Creativity last night, but they have just bringing the power of Google Earth to the Chrome browser. And so where in the past, to really have an amazing Google Earth experience, you had to be on a Windows or a Mac computer running the client version of Google Earth. That version is now free. It's called Google Earth Pro. But you can do amazing things in the Earth for Chrome version, and they have taken hundreds and probably, I guess, you know, thousands, is safe to say, photographs from Cassini, which was this mission that went to Saturn, and for 20 years after it got there, has been photographing the planet and the moons, and showing ice geysers or gaseous geysers coming out of different moons, and just amazing stuff. And it's made it accessible and browsable via the same Google Earth environment. So that is definitely amazing. And since it's in the same section, I'll mention 2 other Google mashup things, which are not quite as exciting because they're a little bit foreboding. But in the process of looking at different things relating to nukes in North Korea and things like that, I came across these 2 resources. They're both created by Alex Wellerstein, who on his Twitter profile, which is just Wellerstein, he says, historian of science, secrecy, and nuclear weapons, programmer and web developer of NukeMap, author of restricted data blog, Harvard PhD, and professor at Follow Stevens, which is the Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, New Jersey. So he's created 2 tools, which at a minimum, if you're talking with students, and of course they're of older age, and this isn't something we're going to want to talk with our youngest kids about, but if we're talking about the possibility of nuclear confrontation with North Korea, which is unfortunately something that's been in the news, and as we're about to host a debate tournament at our school this weekend, I'm thinking that nuke war scenarios, which oftentimes in cross-examination debate seem ridiculous, I think it's probably, there's going to be all kinds of good cards running around there that people are going to use. 2 parts to this. So if you go to the link for missile map, which is at nuclearsecrecy.com/missile map, you can choose a launch preset, and he's recently added North Korea. Of course, this is declassified stuff, and this is his guess, but it shows you what the believed launch capability of North Korea is at this point to be able to reach out and touch someone, across the Pacific Ocean, which really, I think, might just be missing Oklahoma, but it's awfully doggone close. It doesn't hit the East Coast yet. And so you can select a location there on the map, and you'll get the little arc, because this is an ICBM, right, that's going to most likely, if it's going across the ocean, it's going to be exiting the atmosphere and coming back in. And then there's a button that says export to NukeMap, and NukeMap works independently, but it also can work in conjunction. And you can select the anticipated yield of the bomb, and this is really interesting from an historical standpoint, as far as what the different megaton sizes have been of nuclear tests of actual bombs used by the United States, used by the Soviet Union, used by China, and then you can change some things, and it is connected to demographics as far as casualties and radioactive fallout. And so this may seem macabre, but actually I think if we're talking about current events, the World War II generation has almost completely passed away now in our country. And so we don't have that many current memories of, what World War II and the devastation that was wrought not only by nuclear weapons, but by conventional weapons as well, was like. And so certainly looking at a map that talks about, numbers of folks, being killed and things like that is not help you understand it, but these were very compelling geomap resources. And I think something that is certainly worth checking out and considering sharing with not only teachers of geography, but also teachers who are talking about current events with students. Had you seen these tools before, Jason?
I read the articles you shared tonight, and then it reminded me of a couple of tools from 15 years ago that did something similar, but in a much more less high tech way. But yeah, super interesting, and I love that, right? Like that's great to take technology, match it together, and provide almost a mental playground for students to wonder and what if and explore and ask questions and test simulations. So really amazing stuff.
Jason, would you be willing to take us to any of your big data and AI articles? I think these may be ones that we've kind of pulled forward from last week, but I don't think we've talked about any of the DeepMind or the Amazon ones.
Yeah, one of these is a lot older, so let's mix it with another one. They both are related to Amazon, and Amazon it made kind of a faux pas a few weeks ago, and it so happens I was included on this faux pas. Amazon emailed me to let me know that I had a baby on the way, and that I should basically start preparing now to purchase items related to babies. And what's funny about that is that we are hosting an exchange student this year, and we have been joking that we have a kid now, right? We're infamously dinks, double income, no kid, couple, and there was this thing that came in Amazon. And I was like, wow, that's super interesting that it figured out that we had a kid at home. And then I found out that many people had received that email, and it was definitely an error on Amazon's part. And that's more of a like bad AI, bad advertising. But the other article I'm sharing, which is a little more interesting, is that Amazon has been recommending, basically based on X, Y, and Z ingredients, other bomb-making ingredients. In other words, the retailer has been offering grouped together items that could make a lethal bomb. And so this is a BBC article from September 19th where they talk about if you add one or two things to a cart that happen to relate to something that is a bomb-making material, that it will start recommending to you the other ingredients to a bomb, because these things are oftentimes bought together.
So this brings up a question that I'd love to shout out to our chat room and anybody else to tune into. Which, by the way, Peggy just dropped a great link to an Eric Kurtz webinar called Google Tour Builder for Any Subject. So more geo app goodness. But back to your statement as far as Amazon and getting these recommendations. How do we help students understand and be aware of the line at which taking a quiz on your smartphone, sharing, I like this, I like that, just sharing your life via social media, helpful advertising, and I really don't care, to it's creepy, to gosh, our democracy's been subverted by this system. What do we do about it? I'll tell a story about one of my daughters who this past weekend, I just noticed her on her phone, clicking through a quiz. And I said, they're putting that data together about you. And she's like, Dad, it's just a quiz on BuzzFeed. I said, I know, hon, but all of those things are connected, and they're building a profile about you so that they can market to you. And then it's kind of like a meh, who cares? But there is a continuum here, and there are stories which I think we've talked about before where, the marketing becomes very intrusive. Like you're starting to see bomb, ingredient ads, or, perhaps I've read about this where somebody is looking for like an Alcoholics Anonymous group or a counseling group, and then suddenly they're being marketed to, for alcohol ads and seeing things they absolutely don't want to see. But marketers are able to target all kinds of things. And so I don't know, that's a puzzle. Do you have a good answer for us, Jason, that will help me sleep tonight and know how we can help students walk that line and, be aware of it and care? Which, by the way, I'm wearing my I Love to Share shirt today. So I'm still loving to share, but still wrestling with these issues.
Well, and I think part of it is that we need to acknowledge that commerce on the internet means it's going to be constantly trying to sell you additional products, right? And one of the things that I think is underappreciated by students that have such convenient ways to engage in commerce in 2017 is that everything is really tweaked for you to engage in an economic way, right? To show purchase intent in the way you engage with things. And that's an underappreciated part of what the internet has brought us, right? Like the reason why Amazon is recommending additional bomb making materials is because they want you to buy something. They don't want you to build a bomb. They want you to buy the stuff to build a bomb, right? That's a very different concept, right? They're not looking for people to blow things up. They're looking for people to buy. I'm reminded of something that is very interesting to me that's somewhat part of this. Maybe this is a bit of an overshare, but as we've talked about in the past, I am a kidney transplant recipient, and I am pretty aggressively medicated as part of my post-transplant regime, where I am required to take immunosuppressant drugs. And so when I travel, I have to travel with, a variety of pharmaceuticals. This is my travel pharmaceutical pack so that I can take those medications. But part of that is that I had to find little tiny plastic baggies to be able to put my pills into. So this is a morning package of pills for me that's in, it's part of my medical case. Well, if you go onto Amazon and buy one plastic baggies, they do not think you're a kidney transplant recipient. In fact, there are other uses that are also related to the word drugs that are useful when you're buying 1 by 1 inch baggies. And so, for example, if you go to Amazon right now and look for these particular items, they're going to try to sell you things like a scale, right? Also not useful to the kidney transplant recipient taking, tacrolimus. So that's something that is an interesting piece of that. It's not like Amazon is encouraging me to become Walter White and build my own meth empire. What Amazon's encouraged me to do is just buy more crap, right? And so I think that there is a savviness there that we do need to be made aware of. I find it interesting that I do feel like that there was a lot of energy 15 years ago around media savvy and students taking on and understanding advertising and other tricks of the trade. And I don't hear about that as much anymore. Like, I feel like that topic and it's definitely not played because I think it's even more complex and nuanced. And so part of this is, I want to encourage those teachers that were at the forefront of bringing that kind of media savvy education to the classroom. If you haven't done that lately, or if that's fallen out of favor in your school or district, agitate and bring that information back, because in 2017, it's as or more important than it was when this topic first became a hot topic 20 years ago in American schools.
Awesome points. And so shout out to one of my favorite media literacy scholars and sources is Renee Hobbs, Dr. Renee Hobbs. She's now up in Rhode Island, but her website is mediaeducationlab.com. And she just has a wealth of resources related to media literacy, advertising literacy, helping with different elements of digital citizenship, copyright and fair use, things like that. But definitely, teaching media literacy and making that a thing that we do. So I'll add that to the show notes. And then the other thing is, this segues well to one of the articles I had originally put down under the Facebook title. This is the Atlantic from this week on October 12th, 2017. What Facebook did to American democracy. And I really think that what's been emerging over the last few months, is a growing awareness, if we're paying attention and reading the articles, about how the Russians subverted our democracy, with hacks and through Facebook largely. In Ohio, I think this one talks about it was like 33,000 votes or something like that. And so this article, it reminds me of, when we have a bad incident with like the Boston Marathon bombing or something else, usually the intelligence community, will eventually pull out, this was a warning flag and this was a warning flag. And sometimes, or maybe many times, the issue is there's such a volume of information that each of those things can't be, the dots can't be connected to say, oh, okay, that's what's happening here. And that's where machine learning and all these, algorithms and processing power is being applied to try to do that. And the surveillance state is rising up, in part to do that. What this article does is it talks about different studies and articles that were showing what happened during the Obama victory in 2012 when he won, and the role that social media played there. And then, what happened in the last election. In the last show, I mentioned the 60 Minutes episode, I think, where they interviewed the man who was the Donald Trump, head person, running the Facebook campaigns. And so sort of an after the fact, talking about why it was so hard to see this coming. But the point that connects to your statements about Amazon is it's saying, we're talking about the fundamental economics of companies like Google and like Facebook, which is to advertise to you, which is all about selling to you, and then engagement. And there's a really good discussion in this article about the news feed, right? It's this mysterious algorithm that has the goal of getting us to spend more time on social media and specifically on Facebook. And it talks about ranking. There have been a few articles with some of the coders, because this is a secret algorithm, but giving some insight, writing a comment on a particular post, makes that person as a source and that topic rate higher for you in the future as far as your news feed. If you are, liking any kind of interaction that you're doing is going to increase that. And, people are literally working through, their entire working day trying to figure out how to increase, quote, the engagement. And so anyway, this is a great article. And I think it's highly unlikely we're going to see regulatory relief that is going to address this. And I think that I may be wrong. The tinfoil hat is sitting here. I'm not wearing it tonight, but it seems like we're becoming more aware as a society, and maybe we're not as much as I hope that we are, to what happened with our last presidential election and what happened with Brexit, and really the responsibility that Facebook has as one of the most powerful information, aggregation and distribution sources. And this is big for democracy. So do you think people are broadly aware of that, Jason, or am I off base with that?
I think there is a certainly a growing awareness, but I'm not sure if the people that really need to understand that it's part of their point of view yet. And part of it's because if you're being impacted by Facebook in that way, and you're not really looking for the outside criticism to find out more about why, then you may or may not be engaging in the critical discourse that I think is required here. It reminds me of there's a lot of people that talk about press freedom in Russia, and as an example of this, there is an extraordinary accusation that the government controls the press there, because the government controls television news. The vast majority of television news programs are either government supported or government created, and the argument against that is that, well, there's many resources available to the typical Russian citizen, including internet-based news resources and print resources, except that no one reads the newspaper and no one uses the online for news. The primary source for news in Russia is television news, and so the vast majority of people, they can find criticism if they're looking for it, but if they're using the traditional news sources there, which is dominated by television, they're getting a fairly one-sided point of view. And so, yeah, media criticism is not something people usually are spending a lot of time on. A shout out to one of my favorite podcasts, the NPR show On the Media, which is a weekly NPR show that it provides a lot of media criticism. It's really, really well done, but it's also super wonky, right? Like I'm a political science geek. That's my formal academic training is in political science. I think the media is super interesting. I think social media is super interesting. So, a lot of people aren't going to get excited about the meta of media. So I think that's something that we probably need to think some more about. But it goes back to what we always tend to go back to here. That's why education about news, education about media, education about source evaluation is pretty darn important. And now that we say that out loud, one organization that's been doing a great job in the last 2 weeks, and you may have seen this in Facebook feeds if you're a Facebook user, is the Newseum, which is a Washington, D.C. based journalism museum, has been spending a lot of time working on graphics that walk people through how to evaluate sources to find out what is mainstream and what is not. In fact, if you go to museumed.org, and I'll throw this into the show notes, they've released a series of pretty amazing infographics aimed at helping people understand what they're looking at, and also to kind of a share-worthy criteria. The most recent release is a kind of like a little infographic on whether or not something should be shared and is they're calling it share-worthy. And so there is people fighting back, but I think that education's where a lot of that activity needs to happen.
Absolutely. We're the front lines, right? And what would have one time been, oh, we go to the computer lab to do that. Oh, that's, I teach math, I teach social studies, I'm not teaching that. I mean, this is literacy in the 21st century. I'm reminded of David Warlick back in the day, right? Ooh, David Warlick, talking about how literacy is being redefined. And in order to be literate in the 21st century, which we're almost 2 decades into now, we need a different skill set, and we need to be talking about these things, not just in a few isolated classes, but across the curriculum. So yeah, I pulled up their whole media literacy resource page on the museum. And looking for free resources on fighting fake news and developing your students' media literacy skills. Here are highlights from our activities, lessons, case studies, and guest blog posts. And that looks fantastic. All right, so we've got about 10 minutes till the top of the hour. We might kind of go into a bit of a speed round here. We can just kind of bounce back with a couple more articles, and then we'll Geek of the Week it. Does that sound all right?
Sure, sounds great.
I'm going to do cryptocurrency. So we've been talking a little bit on the show from time to time about cryptocurrencies. If you go back in our show notes, there's a really great video explanation that talks about, how does a cryptocurrency work? What is the blockchain, right? The blockchain is the fundamental technology for Bitcoin that makes it an accountable, but also in the case of Bitcoin and many other cryptocurrencies, a decentralized currency, which is not controlled by a particular government or a particular bank. So what did Russia announce this week? They are having the crypto ruble. And so both China and Russia have been showing their cards that it looked like they were going to be moving into cryptocurrency. There's a lot of benefit to a cryptocurrency in that you don't have to print it. You don't have to go through that cost. You don't have to worry about taking things out of circulation. And the anonymity, which criminal elements and others, love about cash, could potentially be taken out by the blockchain. And so one of the things that these articles talk about, there is a Bloomberg article from October 17th, authoritarian cryptocurrencies are coming, talking both about China and Russia. And then Russia Today, which of course is a mouthpiece news agency of Russia, from October 17th, Putin greenlights the launch of the crypto ruble. They want to tax this. And so what the article says is that if someone can't prove where they got their crypto ruble, then they'll just be immediately slapped with a 13% tax, I think is what they said. And there is far less freedom in commercial banking in Russia and China. And so those governments actually have a greater capacity than our government would say here in the United States to push their own currency. And so this is a real twist, and I hadn't seen this before with cryptocurrencies where a central government is saying, oh, great, blockchain, let's make that centralized and use that as a tool to try to make sure we're getting our piece of the pie with taxes as well as potentially chasing down criminals. That was very long for a speed round. I'll try to go faster next time.
Okay, well, let's see if I can turn this around quickly. The Verge reported on October 16, 2017, that Netflix has announced plans to invest $8 billion in original content. Much of it's focused on releasing 30 new anime series, which wouldn't be something I'd be particularly interested in, but apparently there's a number of other live action series slated for development and release, as well as 80 movies that Netflix will be investing in. And I mean, it just goes to show you, television is definitely evolving quickly. The internet is challenging the hegemony of the 3 broadcast networks. I'm looking forward to any new series that Netflix greenlights that could produce the next, very, very interesting series. So good on Netflix for continuing to expand their original library.
Under the title This Week in Hacking, this is my favorite headline of the week from NBC News on October 5th. Former Equifax CEO blames one IT guy for the massive hack, and it doesn't name his name in the article. Wouldn't you love to be that guy? In the defense of that guy, I don't think they say that he didn't patch systems and that led to their, whole demise. We've talked about this on the show as well. They also set up an algorithm which took the date and time of when you asked to freeze your account and then created your supposedly random key, based upon that information. There was some really big fundamental security flaws that I think I probably could have helped with if I was working on their security team at the time. But in addition to that, there's a really good article by Matthew D. Green called Falling Through the Cracks, and crack spelling K-R-A-C-K. And this is talking about massive Wi-Fi attacks and vulnerabilities for RSA. And we won't get into this in extreme detail, but most of the articles that I'm seeing say RSA is being used as a cryptographic algorithm in the case of WPA2 encryption, right? Web encryption has been cracked, and everyone says don't use that on your routers. WPA2 has been what people say, utilize. Part of what was interesting in these articles is that there's a call for machine learning to be used in trying to validate these kind of things. And this is high level math. I had one of our math teachers just voluntarily explained to me, or tried to, how the RSA algorithm works and how all that math works. And so anyway, we need kids to be taking math, learning about cryptography, and being able to intelligently contribute on, a policy level about these kinds of issues. And hopefully developing systems that are going to continue to protect us, because, again, this week in hacking, there's always something new.
Absolutely true. Recode reports on September 14th, 2017, an interesting expose that pulls the veil back on the amount of money spent on Instagram to have influencers hack their wares. And the article reports that advertisers spent an estimated $570 million in 2016 on different tiers of celebrities to utilize, advertise, or just even wear products for you. And to give you a sense of this, they try to break down what a single post might cost an advertiser. They break it down into 5 different tiers of influencers, anywhere from the super duper influencers, the 7 or 8 million follower influencers, all down to the super micro influencer, which have just 50,000 followers, which means I have no idea what I would be called, the minuscule super non-followed influencer, I guess. But the amount of money spent on an average post for a tier 1, 2, and 3 influencer is $21,000, $32,000, or $25,000 respectively, which means that when your favorite celebrity that you follow on Instagram is wearing new earrings, utilizing a new cell phone, talking about the great selfies they're taking with their Samsung phone, that could indeed be advertising that's being aimed at you via celebrity culture. So buyers and social media watchers beware.
And I'll do one more. This is actually a fairly old, 6 years old book and TED Talk. But along the lines of media literacy and filter bubbles and news feeds and all of that, a book I have not read but seems to be a seminal work here is Eli, I guess, Pariser. I'm not saying if I'm saying his name right. Pariser, The Filter Bubble: How the New Personalized Web is Changing What We Read and How We Think. And I think I just bought that last night, used off Amazon for like $5 with shipping. His TED Talk, Beware Online Filter Bubbles, is also from 2011. So I think that's a good media literacy, kind of cultural literacy thing. Like we should probably all we've heard probably of that term filter bubble, but this is one of the origins of it. And if you want to go to the source, watch the TED Talk or read the book.
There it is. And let's see if I can come up with maybe a last one here. And I've lost my page. I'm trying to fill it with words now. And oh, this one's super interesting. Wired on September 26th reports that Verizon, which purchased Yahoo earlier this year, has decided to open source Yahoo's search engine code in a logarithm. And what's interesting about that to me is that I hope someone might take that source code and maybe put together an open source search engine that would give you a little more sense of some of the magic behind why certain things bubble up to the top of search. Of course, that is dangerous because if you tell people, how search finds the top posts, that means that advertisers and other people that are looking to influence your opinion will then tweak things. But it is very interesting that such a major influential player in the search field that's not Google is now allowing people to peek behind and find out more about how Yahoo search results were created.
Well, it is the top of the hour, and that means we probably should start the Geeks of the Week if we have not already. So I'll go first and let you kind of close us out. Mine links to the Google news that I shared earlier about security, and I actually have one of these on my desk now to give it a try, not in the advanced security mode, but just as another option for security. And it is a FIDO UTF security key. So you can find some of these for like $50, but this one is $10 and has 3.5 stars with 99 reviews. It sounds like sometimes it's a little difficult to get into some USB slots, but this is the physical device that you can use to authenticate yourself. And I am going to give this a try. And like I said, we actually do have a teacher without a cell phone who will probably provide one of these to him. We're not going to be getting these for everybody, but if somebody doesn't have a cell phone, then this may be something we're going to do, since as a school, we're going to require everybody to get onto two-step.
Excellent. Well, the Geek of the Week thing I want to share this week is a weather application. It used to be called Forecast.io, and it renamed itself about a year ago to Dark Skies. But Dark Skies, I believe it's .net, is a great web-based weather app, but there's also a mobile application. And what I like about this, and this is, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to show this, this is the Android version of the application. It's very clean. It has a nice modern design to it. But what I like about the Dark Skies app is that especially if you pay for the advanced version, and it's an app that actually costs you a yearly cost as opposed to a one-time cost. And I like the app so much that I do pay $2.99 a year to continue to use the Pro version on my Android phone. It will actually send you notifications or let you know how soon that moisture will appear in your specific area. And I found it to be creepily accurate to where there have been times when I like to go out and enjoy the beautiful University of Montana campus at lunchtime to take a walk each day. And there have been times when I've received a notification that's about to rain, and 3 minutes, it says it's going to rain in 3 minutes. And about 3 minutes later, a big old droplet falls on my head. And so a wonderful application that I would definitely suggest you consider. And again, the beautiful web-based application as well. That's darkskies.net.
Excellent. And I apparently did not explain mine quite well enough. Peggy has asked in the chat room what it does. This is for two-factor authentication, back to the FIDO security key. And so instead of using the Google Authenticator app or using text messaging, which can be spoofed, and there are ways around that, you have to have this physical key in order to do your two-factor. To take that leap into the advanced Google protection, you would need one of those, and you'd also need a Bluetooth device. So, Jason, where can folks find you, and what have you been writing, and will you be writing and doing in the coming weeks tech-wise?
Well, I'm currently working on some detailed documentation that I plan to release publicly for my day job, which is how to set up the Google browser for best efficiency as an online student or teacher. And I'm working on that in context of my day job, but I also hope to publish it on my blog, which is the NCC Tech Savvy Teacher blog, blog.ncc.org, and also the Virtual Learning Leadership Alliance blog, where virtual schools directors have been blogging over the last couple of years to talk about distance learning. But I think that's an important topic, and oftentimes we find that our students struggle a little bit with online classes don't know that they need to do the same thing they need to do in their face-to-face class, which is to make mindful decisions to set yourself up. You want to buy the right notebook, you want to buy the right pen, you want to have the right equipment available, and then setting up your notebook, or in this case, your web browser for maximum efficiency is really the best way to be a tech-savvy online student. So look for that soon, and I'll certainly announce it when that information is available here on the EdTech Situation Room. I'm also on Twitter, Tech Savvy Teach, where I post usually 10, 15 links a week of interesting things I'm reading about. Sometimes they lean a little nerdy. I do have some analytics things plugged into Twitter, and found out last night, for example, that no one clicked on my article on where last night you could tune into live robot fight. So I'm sad to find out that I was the only one interested in that phenomenon.
Sometimes it's better to just not know. But I am W. Fryer on Twitter, and my blog speedofcreativity.org, where I am usually now posting about once a week, but I think I actually posted twice in the last week. And I would encourage you to check out the G Camp OKC, which we have coming up on November the 4th. We're going to be looks like we got about 100 registered. I hope maybe we're going to get to about 150, but it's going to be our first one. And if anything, we're hoping to have the best lunch ever, because we have the Oklahoma Pork Council's smoker at our school when it's not being used at the state fair. And the chef at our school is able to cook amazing smoked chicken and ribs. So yes, if you want to come for nothing else but the meal, $25 will get you a wonderful lunch and a great day of Google Learning on Saturday, November 4th in Oklahoma City at the Cassidy School. So we are the EdTech Situation Room. You can find us at edtechsr.com. All of our links are available at edtechsr.com/links. We invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we have all of our shows that allow you to not only see tinfoil hats, but also Dave puppets and other surprising things that may just jump into your screen. But if you're listening to us on audio, that is great, because we have 32 kilobit audio versions as well as 360p video versions archived there, downloadable from Amazon S3. We want to give a great shout out to our chat room tonight. Thank you to Jamie Camp and Peggy George for joining us. If you'd like to join us, normally you can do that on Wednesday nights here on YouTube Live at 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain, and whatever other time zone you might be in. So until next time, we wish you good luck, be safe, and stay savvy.